What does leadership mean in terms and times of adversity? What does it mean to have policies and governance methods that suit an adverse time in whether it's the economy or country situation? And what does it mean when we talk about the role of the military in a country? To discuss all of this and much more, I've invited to our studios a gentleman who is an advisor to the British Armed Forces and the Ministry of Defence in the UK. Of course, he is the first Buddhist chaplain to the British Armed Forces and the Defence Ministry, Professor Sunil Kariyakarawana. Thank you very much for joining us. Ayubowan to you. This is your 16th year as the advisor to the British Armed Forces and the Defence Ministry, and you become the first and only Buddhist advisor, and the only Sri Lankan, of course. You're also a professor at the Free University of Amsterdam, teaching religion, spirituality. So I like to talk about all these topics, including the very grave issue of radicalization in the world that we talk about among youth. But more importantly, what does it mean to be a chaplain to the British Armed Forces?
Thank you very much, Indeewari. Thanks for having me here today. Yes, as you mentioned, I have been working as the British, with the British Forces past 16 years as the Buddhist Chaplain of the Armed Forces, and as you know, it's a Christian country with Christian chaplains. Christian, vast majority is Christian, but yet they have a keen interest in Buddhism. And the Light of Asia, the Sir Edwin Arnold, who wrote the book, and I think there's so much interest in Buddhism, and as a result, past 16 years, they have seen a vast increase in the number of Buddhists, over 6,000 Buddhists serving in the British Armed Forces. In all ranks, we have a 3-star general as our champion, and then full colonels and the like. So yeah, it is quite an interesting time, as you said. The whole West is turning to the East in one way or the other for advice, guidance, and keen interest how Buddhism in a very unassuming manner, how it has actually contributed to the peace in the world and also prosperity in many ways. As you said, in times of turmoil, times of crisis, Buddhism has so much to offer, and I think this is why a lot of personnel, high ranks, even the royal family, actually, the Prince Charles very directly told me that how keen and interested he is in Buddhism.
How often do you consult with the royal family, especially the Queen herself, and what kind of advice does she seek?
Well, I'm actually based in central London, very close to the Wellington Barracks, and where the Buckingham Palace is right next to it, and she visits the church there very regularly, and I mean almost every week I see her coming, and sometimes we say hello to each other and so on. And when they are on different tours, coming to the Eastern countries, Buddhist nations, and they want to learn Buddhist ethics and Buddhist customs as well. And you must have seen Prince Charles, bowing, with both hands, folded hands. So they regularly actually come to me for advice. And mental health and well-being has been at the top of their, priority agenda. And so all these reasons and more, Buddhism is becoming very popular, not just in the royal family, but in other government departments. The Parliament has 115 MPs sign up for the all-party mindfulness, initiative. So there is a lot of, I've seen last 20 years.
You conduct a lot of mindfulness lessons there, I presume.
Absolutely.
Okay. How many chaplains in the British Armed Forces?
Well, we have about over 300 actually chaplains, but I am the only one Buddhist. There is actually one Sikh, two Muslims, and the like, and the.
Traditionally, it has been the chaplains, the service has included Anglicans and Christians, if I'm not mistaken. So
Correct.
16 years ago, when a Buddhist chaplain was introduced to the service, was that when the Sikh, Hindu and Muslim faith was also introduced? Or?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You know, it actually came as, you know, why the Christians go to the Muslim countries and wage wars and so forth, and they ask the question in the House of Lords, House of Parliament, where are our Muslim imam and Sikh Pandits and Hindu Pandits and so on. And then, you know, all of a sudden this advertisement came on the Guardian, you know, Buddhist chaplain to help, you know, British, you know, armed forces,
yes.
Her Majesty's forces, and I was a bit surprised, but the London Buddhist Vihara approached me and they asked me if I could help them. And you know, really, there was a bit of a resistance initially. Why Buddhists? You know, some people said it should be military should be a no-go area for a Buddhist. And you know, some people even said, sounds like a vegetarian and a Batua, you know. And but later on, people realize how much Buddhism has to offer to the society.
What does it mean when you advise to the British Armed Forces? Is it about the faith, or is it mindfulness lessons regularly? What kind of spiritual help does the armed forces as well as members of the defense fraternity seek from you?
Well, it is a variety, I should say. I know how the day is going to develop. Sometimes I have no idea. You know, but my main key role is my remit is like advice, strategic guidance, and spiritual support and religious support. But outside of that, the vast, you know, majority who contact me are interested in mindfulness, meditation. As you know, mindfulness is a $4 billion industry in the US and in the West, and there is a, you know, serious interest in amongst professionals and so forth. So and so, as you know, there is a variety of reasons why people come to me for advice and guidance.
I'd like to turn to talk a little about governance and policy practices. How important do you think this the question of governance in adversity, policy measures and leadership affect in shaping and combating adverse issues faced by an economy?
Yes, I mean, that's a really good question, Indeewari, because I mean, the leadership is a term that people often use without really realizing its gravity and its weight, because, you know, leadership, you know, especially at a time and, you know, a crisis, leadership really matters so much. And you know, it is not easy to you know, make leaders. And what I see, like, you know, in our little, you know, our country here, Sri Lanka, you know, as leaders, how responsible we should be, especially in times of crisis. I mean, you know, when you watch news, for example, you know, you just go, you know, I mean, average people, you know, if the leaders are kind of pointing fingers at each other, I mean, just imagine what it would mean for an average person, you know. And I think the responsibility, there are a lot of qualities that British Armed Forces talk about, 6 key qualities in leadership, actually, you know, actually integrity, loyalty, selfless commitment, respect for others, you know, and you know, so there are discipline. You know, discipline is the foremost. It's called C drills: courage, discipline, integrity, loyalty, selfless commitment. And I think this is the first thing is so important. And I think this is where military really comes in as well. You know, sometimes we don't realize how much discipline, you know, verbally, physically, mentally we got to be in times of crisis, which is not an easy thing to achieve.
The Buddha himself in his dispensations have preached virtues for a ruler when it comes to running the country. Of course, it was applicable back in the day, but we see that India in the foreign policy, the five principles have been applied, and we talk about the Dasaraja Dharma, the 10 virtues for a ruler. As we talk about all this, how much of significance and importance have we in Sri Lanka given to these principles that we've been taught, that are preached day in and day out? And how much do we apply it in today's society?
Really good question. I mean, now in the 21st century, third decade that we are living in, education is talk about 3 H's, you know, head, heart, and hand. And actually 2,500 years ago, the Buddha said, Bahu Satchancha Sippancha Vinayocha Susikkhitu. So the Bahu Satcha is the knowledge component, Sippa is the skill, and Vinaya is the discipline. And it's only when those three H's, you know, get combined, and that actually make one a complete person. And as you asked, in this leadership, and the Buddhism articulates it so clearly, not just in the Mangala Sutta, Parabhava Sutta, and so many other sutras. And the Buddha actually even talked to this wheel-turning monarch, Chakravarti Raja. The concept of the qualities of the Chakravarti Raja is so important. So, and I think the world is now waking up to the amazing store of knowledge and insights that the Buddha and Buddhism has to offer to the 21st century.
Of course, during election times, we do hear during campaigning that candidates keep promising with reference to kings and rulers about 2,500 years ago, about practices and relating to preachings of the Buddha. But I really like to know how we can shape our policy and governance. Because as I referred, India in their foreign policy, the 5 principles of Panchasila, it is mentioned, of course, this is after Dharmashoka, the great king. These policies continue to be implemented and at least written and spoken of. We say this is a Buddhist country, but how much have we embraced the essence and the principles preached in the Dhamma? These are questions when we talk about, when we actually refer to most recent incidents of extremist violence, uprisings, or even the way we handle certain situations where religion, faith and spirituality have become the core of these issues.
No, absolutely, and you're right. I mean, there are many different types of Buddhisms in a country, in a Buddhist country. You know, what you find in the scriptures is one type of Buddhism, and what is being practiced and what is being talked about, and they can actually vary. But what is really and at the core is Buddhism has like these 3 levels, what we call pariyatti, patipatti, and pativeda. Pariyatti is what the text, what is in the text, and the patipatti is how you put that into practice, and pativeda is the realizations through that. And I think so, in Sri Lanka, we have had amazing Buddhist leaders and Buddhist qualities, Buddhist ethos that everybody, recognizes very immediately. But sadly, our leadership doesn't seem to have embraced those in the same way as as ordinary masses. When you go to a ordinary village, and I mean, in the Western world, you cannot enter a house without an appointment. You just go and knock on the door, and people come and talk to you. And hospitality. I mean, there are a lot of amazing Buddhist qualities in our society. But sadly, we are increasingly losing those, for economics and other reasons. But I think the leadership has a big role to play in trying to implement the Buddhist policies, as you said. I mean, they are well and good to have them in the textbooks and scriptures. But how much are we translating that into our everyday life is a really good question.
How do you respond to these claims by certain members of various faiths, including whether your Sinhalese Buddhist or Burgher, Muslim, or if you follow the Islamic faith, or whether you're a Catholic or Christian? Some may oppose the fact that Sri Lanka continues to label the country as a Buddhist nation. Do you see this as a problem?
Not really, no. I mean, I was, pleasantly surprised. Our cardinal here, the Catholic, the head of the Catholic Church, is quite comfortable being.
His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit.
Yes, accepting, this as a Buddhist country, Buddhist nation, and how wonderful it is. And I think the Buddhism has that goodwill and understanding and appreciation across all faiths and none. And so therefore we really do not need to hide our Buddhist identity as some people want to do. So I mean, Buddhism in one of the Western organizations, I mean, Amaravati, you may have heard Ajahn Sumedho. He said, I mean, Buddhism, we might call it wake-upism, it is an invitation to wake up, wake up to the realities of in the world. I mean, in the pandemic, a lot of people really, I mean, this is a psychological pandemic. Buddhism says, stay calm, do everything you can, and in the worst of circumstances, do your very best is the Buddhist principle. So therefore, nobody can actually resist and argue with those basic Buddhist principles. So therefore, and I think we should be proud as a Buddhist nation. And I think the Western world is quite fascinated by that. And recently we did a conference, the International Committee of Red Cross, and there were over 150 academics from all over the world studying Buddhism and international humanitarian law. So, we do not have to be closet Buddhists. We can just very comfortably come out and actually share the Buddhist insights with the rest
But I'd
of them.
like to ask you, after this short break, how we strike a balance between other faiths too, because here in Sri Lanka, you have a population that follows the Islamic faith, Catholicism, and Hinduism too. But before that, let's take a short commercial break here at Hyde Park. Welcome back. You're joining us at Hyde Park, and I'm in conversation with Professor Sunil Kariyakarawana, the first Buddhist chaplain to the British Armed Forces and the Defence Ministry. I was talking to you about, of course, being a Buddhist nation, how we strike a balance. That's the question I wanted to ask you. But there has been continued pressure on Sri Lanka to become a secular state. And with that kind of Western requests, and also managing within the country people of different faith, like I mentioned, Hinduism, Islamic faith, Catholicism, with all that, how do we strike a balance here? Because we're talking about a diverse population today, although this country is known to be a Buddhist country.
You know, Sri Lanka has been actually a Buddhist nation for, you know, over 2,000 years, and I think the secularity never becomes a problem for Buddhism, because at the time of the Buddha there were 62 religions. You know, 55 of them were theistic faiths, believing in a creator God, and the 7 were atheistic. And the Buddha said, I'm actually not adding to the list, and I don't want a 63rd one. So therefore, I mean, Buddhism by very nature is very comfortable in offering something. I mean, this is, I should tell you a little story with a soldier. You know, one British soldier, it's a Caucasian origin, came to me and he said he wants to be a Buddhist, and I was keen and interested to know. I have to interview him before I accept him, and I asked him, why do you want to be a Buddhist? You know, and he said, he said for 2 reasons. Number one is Buddhism doesn't demand anything of me before it offers something to me. I mean, I thought that was a very interesting description of Buddhism, because Buddhism is not interested in like what faith you are and whether you are in my group or that group, but it is interested in offering welfare, the spiritual support, kindness, compassion, generosity to others.
But do you think we have embraced these teachings in its fullest spirit?
Well, of course. I mean, it is. Of course, there are different levels of practical embracing of this, but I would say, generally I'm very proud that the Sri Lanka has had, I mean, in our psyche at least, there is these Buddhist values. We are brought up and we are actually living in a society. We used to, by and large, I mean, you see in the past how our rulers and our we have been, I mean, playing a bigger role in the spiritual sphere, and Sri Lanka was the first country where animals had a hospital, if you know, So we have shown our Buddhist ethos, Buddhist qualities, and so on. But now, of course, due to so many, reasons, economics and so on, you may not see it everywhere. Mm-hmm. But I think I'm actually very proud, and I'm having lived outside of Sri Lanka past nearly 35 years, and I've seen there's lot of people outside have great appreciation, admiration of and to Buddhism.
I'd like to take your attention to the military role. This is something I promised we will discuss during the program, the role of the military in any nation. Sri Lanka's military has played an important, massive role here in the conflict, in eliminating terrorists. But at the same time, when we talk about Buddhist preachings, one may question whether there's a conflict here when a state implements Buddhist teachings and wage war. At the same time, we're talking about developments, very disturbing developments in our part of the region, in Afghanistan. The Taliban taking over power there in Afghanistan, and at the same time, Western powers moving out of Afghanistan, and there is chaos there. But at the same time, we're talking about the British armed forces also who were deployed through the NATO forces there in Afghanistan. What is your experience dealing with them?
Well, it is, I mean, I think, as you know, Afghanistan and then that part of Asia, I mean, somebody actually writes a book on like 2/3 of the world's population today live in areas where Buddhism was the dominant force, and the Burmese statues didn't just come outside, out of the blue. I mean, there was a Buddhist civilization and Buddhist communities and so on. So actually, coming back to your question about the military and Buddhism, and I don't think there is such a vast contradiction, because the Buddha himself was a warrior caste, Shastrian, and he knew exactly what the military was for. But I mean, the militaries, different nations can use the militaries in different ways, of course. But in a country where the democracy and the rule of law is well respected, Buddhism really does understand the role of the military. And there were some generals coming to the Buddha and asked questions. Is it okay to? I mean, of course, there was that mutual understanding. So Buddhism talks about the spiritual development, but spiritual development is not possible without security, safety in the nation. I'll tell you again another interesting story. I took a group of military personnel to one of the monasteries, Amaravati, and the chief abbot, the military personnel who went there in their uniform were a bit worried about what would the response be from the abbot of the temple, and welcome us all. And the abbot said, I'm so comfortable with you, and I'm able to do my meditation in this monastery because you are actually at the front line providing security and safety. And I'm really a bit surprised that in this country the military is being looked at in a very raise eyebrows about military and why military is involved in this and that. And
I mean here in Sri Lanka in current times,
exactly.
With the pandemic. Yes, that's something I wanted to ask you. What you have experienced there in the UK and the military involvement in various matters of state. How expanded is it? How much are they responsible for matters of state, and how little do they do? And let's compare here in Sri Lanka. We see that the military is involved in from the process of the vaccination to providing quarantine facilities to attending to many matters of day-to-day life when it comes to helping the civilian population. Of course, their role during the war was different, but now it has become a more humanitarian role. But the question of whether the military is too involved in too much of things, whether their presence is seen too often here in the country. What do you think here?
No, I really think there is no, I'm really proud to see the military playing a major role in this. In the UK military, there were about 1,700 vaccination centers, and there were about 400 military personnel, providing body bags and putting the bodies in the bags and all of that. Actually, the military is directly involved, and they play a central role. And I'm a bit shocked that some political leaders in this country is critical of this, and I really do not understand. And I'm very cynical of and also surprised why they politicize this issue. The military is the hands and legs of a nation, and when a nation is in crisis, they go to play their role, and they do a great job, and their discipline is absolutely essential in times of crisis. So therefore, and I really, UK military, and it's not just UK, the US and other places, they played a central role, and they've done a great job in curbing and helping, supporting, and I was actually, my workload increased like fourfold during the pandemic. And
because you're involved with the military while they engage in pandemic-related services. But at the same time, the question of militarization, this is a massive question that is discussed even in the Western world. At the UNHRC, when they talk about Sri Lanka, the involvement of the military, How do you observe this situation in Sri Lanka, especially because we talk about the imposition of a sense of fear among civilians due to the presence of military and military holding high positions in the system. This is a question that we're grappling with now.
Well, I mean, I think it's a wrong use of the word militarization. What do you really mean by militarization? I mean, you know, military has about 28 different roles and tasks to perform, and humanitarian is a major one. And you know, when you say militarization, and I think that is a political game, some, you know, opposition political parties use this word without even contemplating on the meaning of the word. And I don't think, you know, I mean, you know, when the Ebola broke out in Africa, and you know, the British forces just went there and helped, supported, and was that a militarization of a country? No. And I think, you know, and I think the military has a great discipline, which is required more in times of crisis. And I think so that should not be misunderstood and misrepresented as militarization. You know, I think we should all learn that discipline in times of crisis, which is actually very much inculcated in the military. So therefore, and I think it looks like that we are conflating and confusing these concepts, and taking it too far, and also for our own political ends, in my view. Which I don't think is necessary. I think, on the contrary, what we really need is, as we discussed, the leadership is, in times of crisis, to come together rather than point fingers at each other. Just come together. This is what the Buddha said, you know, samagga sammodamana avivadamana kirodaki bhuta. You know, these are the words of the Buddha. He says, you know, always when there is a difficulty, work together in unity, in harmony. And he just cites these examples of this Latukika Jataka, you know, when the hunter was trying to get these birds, you know, how they actually even lift up this net together and you know, saved their lives, and they saved the lives of others. So, and I think in times of crisis, unity and showing leadership and restraint is fundamentally important. That I think, you know, in Sri Lanka, I'm a bit surprised that you know, the political leaders have not achieved that level of maturity, you know. And I think it is, come on, I mean, we are living in the 21st century, third decade. Let's face it, you know, let's be little bit more grown up, and you know, handle a crisis situation you know, together. And you have seen, I mean, in the British Parliament, whenever there are these you know, decisions being made, the oppositions come together and support and work together and help. You know, I am yet to see that kind of collegiality and unity and togetherness and team spirit, especially at a time like this.
Does this mean, are you implying that it is only the military that is capable of showing leadership, and the political leadership, in fact, is immature and fails to do so? Does this take us to our education system, where we have failed to give an education that caters to the needs of a country's practical way of life?
Yeah, no, I'm actually not implying that at all. What I'm saying is, I'm saying that the political leadership should really understand the you know, resources of a nation. The military, as I said, is the hands and legs of a nation, and those should be really used properly in times of crisis. We should come together, rather than pointing fingers, and we shouldn't do it this way, that way. And I was also surprised to see that they are proposing to do a lockdown themselves. How strange, political decisions. The government has been. I'm not a political beast in any way. I'm not supporting any party at all. But I'm actually I'm a very pragmatic person, and I see across the world how people operate and work together. There are the systems to operate. You should actually work as a team and listen to each other, help support each other. And, otherwise, the poor masses, and there will be many more deaths, many more crises, many more difficulties. So it's so important that we work united, united we stand.
Right. With that, I think it's time we take a short break here at Hyde Park. To stay with us. Welcome back. You're joining us at Hyde Park, and I'm in conversation with Professor Sunil Kariyakarawana. Professor Kariyakaranwana, let me take our attention and direct your attention to radicalization. This is a massive issue, a problem that world over we are talking about. 2019, April 21st, Sri Lankans opened their eyes to the impact, the ugliness of extremism. Radicalization, as 3 churches were bombed, hotels were bombed here in Sri Lanka, and we saw a ring of explosions in parts of the country. But again, youth radicalization, and in the UK too, we talk about this question of radicalization, where we see a massive wave there. And from within the military also, we talk about certain elements of extremism at play. How do we manage that? What kind of approach do you, including the rest of the members of the chaplain service, have when addressing these questions?
It's a really practical question because I think even in the UK there has been lot of cases of radicalization, the Manchester bombing, the London bombing, and so on. But I mean, we must see how they responded to that. I mean, rather than I think we should not respond to poison with poison, and I think rather we should be mature enough to absorb those elements, and I think it would lead to more radicalization if we, work in such a way. And I think, and I think the extremism it raises its ugly head anywhere and everywhere. And I think, decent masses who actually have admiration, appreciation for common lives. I don't think any faith, is to be blamed on any radicalization. These are kind of political radicalizations, and I was shocked to see the Eastern attacks and so on. And I think, but my experience with the UK forces is they actually root out any type of extremism, right? They nip it in the bud. And I think we should, because the human nature it's so easy for us to fall into extremism in one way or the other. So, and I saw, I mean, in the ministries, in the government decision, and the policy is to curb the radicalization. And I think I was so happy to see the Christian community, the Catholic community in Sri Lanka, how well they handled the situation, not letting it go out of their hands, and it could have actually lead to some more deaths and so on. But I think the decent world should always try to curb this with with love and compassion. The Buddhist response, as you say, the nahi verena verani sammanti the kudaichanan. So we, the same thing applies to this. We cannot actually respond hatred with hatred. It's only with love. So therefore, and I think the in my 20 years of experience, and I've seen the government levels and other community levels, there is vast understanding that we really do not point fingers at people. We actually single out these extremism for their own extreme ends, perpetrate these wrongdoings. We should not be promoting that at all. And sometimes, I see, even in the mainstream news media, like people like some monks just appear and talk about this extremism which is not warranted and called for in Buddhism at all. And we should instead try to understand where they come from, and in the interest of peace and harmony, work with the common, common people and the decency of the nation.
You talk about understanding extremists, but how do we filter these? Because we talk about the requirement of laws and regulations within a country to ensure that these extremists don't have an opportunity to engage in that kind of propaganda. What experiences can we draw from the UK? One, and also while I ask you a response for that question, how does the UK Armed Forces deal with post-trauma depression and stress? We talk about Sri Lankan Armed Forces engaged in a 3-decade-old civil war. 12 years ago, we ended the war, but the question of rehabilitation. I'm aware that our armed forces, under the leadership of then Army Commander General Ada carried out an important exemplary rehabilitation work for former LTT cadres. But what of the armed forces? So you've got two questions there.
Thank you very much. I mean, to address your first question, and what does the UK forces and how do they handle this extremism? And they really do not leave any room for pulling the common masses into extreme ends, which is great. That really single out this handful of extremists, who perpetrate these atrocities for their own ends. But with regard to the second question, and I think it's a really good question, the rehabilitation, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a huge problem. I mean, it's not just in one military, across the world. And I think, what we don't realize is military is also part of our society. And then when we actually scar them, we damage them, we sometimes forget them. And I think I'm very pleased that you mentioned General Dayaratnayaka's initiative in rehabilitation and so on. And I think Sri Lanka has that great ability to actually bounce back, actually from any adversity. And that is, resilience. That is called, the definition of resilience is ability to bounce back from adversity. So Sri Lanka has done it really well. And we should be really proud of that. And in fact, but I think at the same time, we need to support these people. And I have worked with the armed forces, some Sri Lankan, armed forces personnel as well. And I'm amazed how disciplined, how wonderful, and how caring these people are. So therefore, and I think we. Buddhist values, Buddhist meditation, mindfulness, I mean, though we may not call them in the Western sense, there is so much mindfulness practice already built into our system, which has helped us a lot.
One last question before we wrap up. I think you mentioned about security and safety of a nation. We talk about sovereignty, we talk about pressure and the dangers and risks to the sovereignty of our nation. But what kind of role does the military play here, outside the role in a civil war, but in terms of the security and safety of the country, as well as policy, when we talk about Buddhist policies, virtues related to the Buddhist teachings, how can we ensure the safety and nation of the country?
Yeah, safety. I mean, the Buddha says the safety always should come from within. And how if you are verbally, physically, mentally, sound and discipline, and then your security is already built in. So the greatest insurance that Buddhism talks about, the insurance that comes from within. And I think this is, the virtues, as you said, the 5 main principles, and the caring attitude. I mean, the Buddhism actually does not rely too much on the outside for its own security. And the Buddha said, when Pasena the Kosala asked, what is the best security system, he said, it is the security that comes from within. And I have had conversations with General Dayaratnayaka. I mean, and I've learned so much that, because they have no enmity towards others, and they are, if it is a terrorist who come with a gun to kill, you have to actually act. But that doesn't mean that you are actually acting with vengeance and to take revenge and a personal biases towards people, which is amazing. And I think this is the type of training that the military is given. So which may not necessarily be understood by ordinary people. So to answer your question, actually the greatest security comes from those principles, values and standards. And I think that's why military doesn't see like, I'm going to go and wage a war, but they are basically interested in protecting the masses. So when a military personnel go out, I just tell them, if you are actually going out to kill, you shouldn't be in the military. You should be in a prison. But your job is to protect and protect those civilians, unarmed personnel. So therefore, that mission is a different thing. So therefore, and I think we should understand them better, and also look after them as
Right.
they are our heroes.
I think that's all the time we have on the show tonight, but thank you very much for your expertise, for sharing with us your knowledge on the subject, and I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Indeewari.
We had with us Professor Sunil Kariyakarawana, the Buddhist Chaplain to Her Majesty's British Armed Forces, the Ministry of Defence of the UK, and advisor to the Ministry of Defence. He's also a professor of the Free University of Amsterdam, teaching spirituality and religion. Thank you for joining us at Hyde Park.